My name is Betty Lark. I'm 31 years old. And this is the story of how my family tried to use me like an ATM, until I cut them off, and watched the house I once called home collapse, brick by brick, without lifting a finger. The day my life changed didn't come with an earthquake. No screaming. No slamming doors. Just my mother's icy voice cutting through the living room like a blade. "Get out," she said, her eyes locked on mine. No emotion, no shaking voice, just a cold command. "You're ungrateful. And if you can't respect this house, then leave it." It didn't matter that I had just come back from my third 60-hour week. It didn't matter that I was the one who had been silently paying their mortgage for nearly 2 years. That I had groceries in my hand. That I had just paid off the new water heater. None of it mattered. I was the problem. Not my brother, Marcus, who hadn't held a job in 5 years. Not my father, who refused to return to work after the economy betrayed him. Not my mother, who pretended her back problems made lifting a spoon a triumph. It was me. Because I had started to ask questions. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just walked out with the same 3 things I brought into that house years ago when I was 17, my dignity, my silence, and a worn canvas bag with a change of clothes. I remember the door closing behind me. How final it sounded. How freeing. They thought I'd come back. That I'd do what I always did, send the money, patch up the cracks, and say thank you for the privilege. They thought I needed them. But I didn't. Not anymore. It started gradually, as poison often does. Drip by drip. Growing up in a small, sagging house just outside of Fort Worth, Texas, I always felt like I was performing. Like I was the responsible daughter in a role I hadn't auditioned for. Marcus was the dreamer, the artist. Mom's favorite. Dad's pride. He could spill soda on the carpet, crash a car, get arrested for unpaid tickets, still, he was the one they defended. Marcus has potential, Mom would say with a sigh, like she was describing a misunderstood genius. Just needs the right break, Dad would add, turning the page of his newspaper like the headline might change his son's fate. Meanwhile, I got straight A's, worked weekends at the diner, tutored math, and still came home to silence. No applause. No fridge magnets with my awards. Just make sure you keep that GPA up and don't forget to pay your part of the phone bill. I paid for my own college. Slept in a shared dorm room while Marcus stayed in his studio, aka our parents' garage, eating takeout with the money I slipped to Mom for groceries. Even after I graduated with a finance degree and landed a job in Austin, I still thought maybe they'd change. Maybe I'd finally be seen. Loved. Not just needed. Instead, the first call I got from Mom after moving wasn't to say congratulations. It was to ask if I could cover their electric bill. At first, I didn't mind. It was just $122. I had it. I told myself it was temporary. But temporary turned permanent. 1 bill became 4. Then the mortgage. Then a surprise root canal for Dad. Then Marcus accidentally broke the dishwasher. I worked long days. I went home to my silent 1-bedroom apartment. Ate frozen burritos. Took on freelance projects just to keep sending money. I sacrificed vacations, health insurance, and sleep. And still, they treated me like I was selfish for ever hesitating. The turning point came 6 months ago. I had just gotten off a late Zoom call with a client in Europe. I hadn't eaten since 11 a.m. My head was pounding. My inbox had 53 unread emails. And my phone buzzed again. Not a "how are you?" Not a "we're proud of you." Just one sentence. "Betty, we're almost out of almond milk and paper towels. If you're coming by, grab some." No please. No thank you. Just an errand. Like I was the family maid with a company car and a corporate card. But I still went. Still drove the 45 minutes with 2 bags of groceries and my pride buried somewhere beneath the whole wheat crackers. And that's when it happened. I walked in to find them all sitting there, like a jury. Mom on the couch, arms crossed. Dad standing stiffly behind her. Marcus, as usual, with a video game controller in one hand and a half-eaten sandwich in the other. "We need to talk," Mom said. I sat down. My chest already tight. "We've talked," she continued. "And we think it's time you contribute more." "More?" I blinked. "I already pay the mortgage. And the water. And the groceries. What more?" "You make the most money," Marcus cut in, not even looking up. "Seems fair." Fair. That word echoed in my skull like a warning bell. I don't remember everything I said. Just that when I reminded them of the thousands I'd sent, the things I gave up, the years I'd lost, they didn't flinch. "If it's too much for you," Mom said flatly, "then go." And I did. I got up, left the bags on the counter, and walked out without another word. And no one followed. It's been 6 months since that day. 6 months since I stopped sending money, stopped answering calls, stopped playing the part of the good daughter. The silence was unbearable at first. But then it became beautiful. I started cooking again. Reading. Sleeping in. I even joined a weekend hiking group and took a solo trip to Santa Fe, my first vacation in 6 years. And then one morning, while sipping coffee on my balcony, the silence broke. A message from Dad. "Haven't seen the mortgage this month." The bank called. No greeting. No "how are you?" Just a reminder that, in his mind, I was still the safety net. I didn't reply. Instead, I called the mortgage company. And what they told me froze my blood. The mortgage hadn't been paid in almost 8 months. Delinquent. On the edge of foreclosure. February. That meant even when I was still sending money, they weren't using it for the house. They lied. I sat in silence for a full hour. And then I made a decision. I wasn't going to send another cent. Not now. Not ever. Let the house fall. Let the walls I paid for crack and rot. Let the roof I patched with my last bonus check finally collapse. Let them see what happens when the foundation they took for granted vanishes. They kicked me out. So I cut the mortgage off. And watched everything crumble. The funny thing about silence is that once you stop fearing it, it becomes your favorite kind of armor. No noise. No manipulation. No guilt-laced phone calls. Just peace. But peace, as I was about to learn, doesn't last long when other people are still living in the wreckage you escaped. A week after I learned the house was heading into foreclosure, the texts started pouring in. Not from Dad. Not even from Marcus. It was Mom. At first, she tried the old method, subtle guilt dressed up as casual concern. "Just wondering if you've been busy, sweetheart. We noticed a payment didn't go through. Hope everything's okay." Then, a day later. "I know things have been tense, but we're still family. Maybe we can talk?" She always did that. Reached for the word family like it was a rope that could still pull me back into their storm. But this wasn't just a storm. This was a flood. One they had created, and now they were begging me to rebuild the dam. I didn't answer. 2 days later, Marcus called. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail. "Betty, I know you're mad or whatever, but seriously, we need help. The bank is threatening to take the house. And it's not fair for us to go through this when you can stop it." I played that message twice. Not fair. As if fairness had ever applied in that household. As if it was fair that I worked through the flu just to keep the lights on. Or that I skipped therapy because I couldn't afford it while paying for Dad's new prescription. Or that I spent my 30th birthday sitting in a laundromat because I was too broke to fix my dryer and too ashamed to tell anyone why. They didn't know that version of me. The one who cried in the shower while calculating which bill could wait another week. They only saw the version that kept showing up, card in hand, smile in place. I thought about blocking them. But I didn't. Not yet. Because something inside me, maybe the last piece of the daughter they once had, wanted to look them in the eye before I cut the cord for good. It happened on a Thursday evening. I'd just finished a quarterly report that earned me praise from my boss and a spontaneous invite to dinner with a senior executive. The old me would have declined. Too much guilt. Too many what-ifs about missing a call from home. But this new me? She wore lipstick, ordered a second glass of wine, and laughed without checking her phone once. When I got home, I made the decision. I opened the video call app and hit the button that used to summon home. It rang. Once. Twice. Dad picked up. The screen flickered, and there they were. Mom, wrapped in a shawl. Dad with his usual blank stare. And Marcus, as always, lounging on the couch like life owed him a seat. No one said hello. So I did. I'm calling because we need to talk. All of us. One last time. No interruptions. No fake tears. Just silence. I could work with that. I've sent thousands to cover that house. Mortgage. Utilities. Repairs. I even skipped getting a root canal because I used the money to patch your roof instead. Mom glanced at Dad, then folded her arms. We didn't ask you to skip your dental. But you did ask for help. Repeatedly. And when I gave it, none of you asked what it cost me. Dad cleared his throat. Betty, we're not saying you didn't help. But things have been hard. You mean since Marcus ordered a new iPad on the same day you told me the water heater was broken? I asked, voice cool. Or since I saw Easter photos with you in a brand new dress, right after telling me you were too broke to pay the trash bill? Marcus finally looked up. What is this? A trial? No, I replied. It's a reckoning. He rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. I didn't flinch. You never noticed when I was crying in the bathroom before work. Or when I pawned my camera to make a last-minute payment. But now that the bank is involved, suddenly I matter again. Mom's voice dropped, soft but sharp. You don't understand what it's like to feel like you're losing your home. I shook my head. No, Mom. You don't understand what it's like to be the only one fighting to keep it, while everyone else watches from the couch. Dad's voice cracked. Betty, please. Just this once. Help us. We'll take over after. The lie was so familiar I could recite it in my sleep. No, I said. Because just this once always becomes just once more. And I'm done dying on a hill that no one else is even climbing. Marcus muttered something under his breath. I didn't bother asking. I ended the call. Not out of spite. Not even out of rage. But because the conversation was over the moment they decided my worth only existed in what I could provide. After that call, I blocked them all. Every number. Every email. I removed their contacts, deleted old voicemails, and even reset my Netflix password. At first, it felt cruel. But then I remembered the dozens of times they chose convenience over care. Silence over sincerity. Entitlement over effort. And that house? The one with the creaky stairs and the damp basement and the kitchen I once painted by hand? It would be gone within weeks. And I wouldn't be the one paying to save it. I didn't destroy their home. They did. I just stopped pretending I could hold it together alone. I always thought the worst part of walking away would be the guilt. But it wasn't. It was the calm. A calm so foreign that I didn't know what to do with it. For the first time in years, my phone didn't buzz with demands. There were no midnight emergencies, no guilt-laced pleas, no quiet manipulations disguised as check-ins. The air in my apartment felt different, like I could breathe deeper. I started doing things for the first time, small things. I cooked meals that weren't just microwavable. I bought myself a real coffee maker. I even picked up painting again, something I'd dropped back in college because Marcus needed a new set of tires and I sold all my supplies to cover them. I was beginning to remember who I was before I became the family's fixer. I didn't miss them. That surprised me. I missed the idea of family. But not the people who carried that label. Still, the damage didn't vanish. It lingered, like fingerprints on a window you keep cleaning but can't quite erase. Some nights I'd lie awake wondering if I was heartless. If maybe I should have sent one last check. If it made me cold to let the house go into foreclosure knowing how much history lived in those walls. But every time I got close to reconsidering, the memory returned. That cold living room. That empty gratitude. That moment when Mom looked me in the eye and said, "If this is too much for you, then don't come back." She said it like a challenge. Like she never thought I would. And that's when I knew, this wasn't just about money. It never was. This was about control. About keeping me tethered through guilt, through loyalty, through that endless unpaid debt called family obligation. But here's the truth. Obligation without respect is slavery. And I refuse to be a slave anymore. A month passed since the video call. Then, on a bright Sunday afternoon as I was walking home from a local art fair, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Then another call came. Same number. Followed by a voicemail. I almost didn't listen. But curiosity won. It was a woman's voice. Clear, professional. "Hi, this message is for Ms. Betty Lark. My name is Karen Simmons. I'm a legal assistant with Hudson and Reeve Property Associates. I'm calling regarding a pending foreclosure on 242, Meadowgate Drive, your previous family residence. You are listed as a financial contributor on prior transactions and were noted as a contact on the mortgage assistance file. We would like to confirm if you intend to make any further contributions or require documentation related to the foreclosure proceedings. Please call us back." I stopped the message. Contributions? Mortgage file? My name was never on the deed. I made sure of that. But somewhere along the way, my payments must have been logged. Maybe Mom mentioned me on a form. Maybe the bank assumed from my bank transfers that I had a vested interest. It didn't matter. I wasn't going to save the house. But I did want documentation. So I called back. Ms. Simmons was polite but efficient. "Yes," she said. "We show repeated monthly payments from your account through a third-party authorization, presumed to be parental, but the balance remained delinquent due to non-payment on the principal." "Wait," I said. "Are you saying they were only paying part of the mortgage with the money I sent?" "Yes, ma'am. Based on our records, your contributions often went to cover fees and penalties, but the core balance remained unpaid. There's also record of withdrawal for non-housing expenses using redirected funds." My stomach turned. I knew what that meant. They were taking the money and using it to cover everything but the house. Designer clothes. Take-out meals. New electronics for Marcus. They hadn't just used me. They robbed me. I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process it all. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. No. That emotion had long dried out. Instead, I opened a spreadsheet. Line by line, I started adding every amount I'd sent. $120 for electricity, $328 for groceries, $600 for that broken water main, $1,100 when Dad needed emergency dental work that he never actually got. In total? Over $42,000. Gone. Not in my name. Not in a contract. Just in guilt-ridden, desperate transfers to people who never intended to stand on their own. The next morning, I walked into my office and sat down with my firm's in-house attorney. Not for vengeance. Not even to sue. I wanted to make sure no one ever tied me to that house again. We drew up a formal disassociation letter. I attached every bank statement, every transaction log. I requested confirmation from the mortgage company that I was not, and had never been, a legal cosigner. Then I filed a financial boundary notice with my bank. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about finally severing the cord they thought would always be invisible. And that's when something wild happened. An opportunity fell into my lap. 1 week later, during a networking event, I ran into Olivia Grant, someone I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. She was a real estate investor now, focused on flipping distressed homes in neighborhoods like the one I grew up in. We got coffee. Talked about life. She mentioned a house going into foreclosure soon, described the location, the layout, the worn wood beams and creaky stairs. I nearly choked on my latte. It was their house. My childhood home. She was thinking about buying it. Renovating. Maybe turning it into a duplex. I smiled. Then, calmly, I said, if you do buy it, I'd be happy to help fund the redesign. On one condition. What's that? She asked. That you never rent it to a family named Lark. I didn't go out of my way to destroy their world. I simply refused to be the glue that kept it from falling apart. And once that glue was gone, everything began to unravel exactly the way I suspected it would, fast, quietly, and without ceremony. 3 weeks after I met Olivia at the cafe, I received a short text from her. Just closed on Meadowgate. Got the keys. No exclamation point. No emojis. Just the cold, clear confirmation that the house I grew up in, the one I bled for financially, was no longer ours. Well, no longer theirs. I sat in my office, staring at my monitor, barely seeing the spreadsheet on my screen. My hands were still. My breath, steady. I thought I'd feel more. But there was no pain. No panic. Just release. The following Saturday, Olivia invited me to do a walkthrough. She said it was gutted, needed work, but structurally sound. I hesitated at first. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see it. But eventually curiosity won. I drove out to the old neighborhood. It looked smaller than I remembered. The trees more wilted. The fences leaning like they'd given up trying to stay upright. When I parked across the street, I half expected someone to open the front door and yell my name. But no one was home. Not anymore. I stepped through the threshold of 242 Meadowgate with slow, deliberate steps. The walls still bore faint outlines where old picture frames once hung. The floors creaked beneath my shoes in familiar ways. But the heart of the home, whatever that once meant, was gone. The kitchen was stripped. Appliances removed. Paint peeling. I remembered scrubbing that floor after Marcus spilled chili and never cleaned it. I remembered patching the hole in the wall with Dad's tools while he watched TV. I remembered everything I gave. And everything they took. I'm thinking we knocked down that wall, Olivia said, walking beside me. Open up the space. Maybe install skylights. I smiled faintly. Skylights would be nice. Let in something this place never had much of. What's that? Light. She gave me a curious look. You okay? Yeah, I replied. I'm better than I've ever been. That night, I lay in bed thinking about how fast the tables had turned. The house was gone. My name was free of any legal ties. Olivia had offered me a stake in the renovation, said she'd value my financial acumen on the investment side. I declined the profit share, though. All I asked for was this. I want the first tenant to be someone who reminds you of me. A young woman. Hardworking. Overlooked. Trying to build something with no help. She agreed without hesitation. And just like that, the house that drained me for a decade would finally shelter someone who deserved it. But the past wasn't done knocking. The next morning, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "We need to talk." I opened it. It was from Marcus. "Betty. I know you blocked my number, and I don't blame you. But I thought you should know we've been evicted. The house is gone. Everything inside it, and Mom's boxes, Dad's old papers, my stuff. They just showed up and changed the locks. Mom is staying with a cousin in Lubbock. Dad is with Aunt Celia. I'm honestly not sure what I'm doing. I don't expect you to help. I just wanted to say I didn't realize how much you did until it was too late. I was a jerk. Probably worse. I guess I thought you'd always be around. That no matter how bad things got, you'd come back and fix them. You didn't. And now I see why. I'm sorry. M. I read the message once. Then again. It wasn't long or elaborate. No sob story. No request for money. Just, the first real acknowledgement I'd ever received from my brother that I mattered for more than what I gave. I didn't reply. Not out of spite. But because some things don't need to be answered. Some things need to be sat with. Felt. Understood. Maybe that was his first step toward growing up. Maybe it wasn't. But it wasn't mine to carry anymore. Weeks passed. I planted herbs on my balcony. I picked up a ceramics class. I started waking up before my alarm, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I felt whole. One afternoon, I passed a cafe where two sisters were laughing over coffee. For a brief moment, my chest tightened. I wondered what life might have looked like if I'd had that kind of sibling. Someone who noticed when you were tired. Who asked how your day was without an ulterior motive. But then I reminded myself, the absence of love doesn't make me unlovable. It makes me a survivor. I gave everything to a family that never gave back. And I took it all back. Not through revenge. But by choosing myself. And for the first time ever, that was enough. You'd think that after a story like mine, the next chapter would be quiet. That the villains would retreat, the hero would rebuild, and life would resume under a soft, golden light. But healing doesn't come wrapped in silence. It comes in confrontation. With yourself. With memories. With truths that don't vanish when the locks change. A month after Marcus emailed me, I ran into Dad. I wasn't expecting it. I was at a gas station near the outskirts of the city, refueling on my way back from a short hiking trip. I'd stopped to get a bottle of water, still wearing my trail gear and earbuds, when I saw a familiar figure hunched over by the air pump. He looked smaller. Grayer. Like someone had deflated him. He turned. His eyes met mine. I paused, unsure what to do. The last time we spoke, he told me, just this once. The last time I saw his face, it was through a screen, shadowed by a lifetime of silent expectation. Now, here he was, struggling to fill a low tire on a borrowed car. He straightened up. Betty. I kept my distance. He nodded slightly, awkward. Didn't expect to see you. I pulled my water bottle close to my chest. I could say the same. There was a silence between us. Not angry, just full of all the things we both knew. Then he surprised me. I know what we did, he said quietly, and I won't ask you to forgive it. I blinked. He looked off at the horizon. I used to tell myself I was doing the best I could. That your mother had it harder, and Marcus had it tougher, and that you were the strong one, so you didn't need as much. But now. I see we turned your strength into a reason to exploit you. I didn't know what to say. He rubbed the back of his neck. I haven't spoken to your mother in weeks. She's staying with her sister in Lubbock. Keeps saying this isn't her fault. That tracks, I muttered, before I could stop myself. He looked down. I thought I was a good father. That providing a roof, even a shaky one, was enough. But the only reason that roof stayed up the last few years was you. I exhaled through my nose. I know. His eyes met mine again. This time, he looked old. Not in years. In weight. I don't expect anything from you. Not anymore. I just wanted you to know, I see it now. All of it. I waited. But there was no ask. No angle. No guilt trip. Just the truth, long overdue. And in that moment, I realized something. The apology I'd wanted for years wasn't a string of perfect words. It wasn't flowers or letters or groveling. It was clarity. Recognition. And he gave me that, at last. Still, I didn't move closer. I didn't hug him or invite him back into my life. Because clarity isn't a key. It's a mirror. And all he was allowed to do now was look. Later that night, I sat by my window, thinking about the versions of me that lived in that old house. The version who begged to be seen. The one who quietly paid bills while they celebrated Marcus's gym check-ins like he'd climbed Everest. The one who gave up therapy, vacations, sleep, and comfort to hold a family together with duct tape and hope. I mourned her. I mourned what she could have become sooner if she hadn't spent so long proving her worth. But I also honored her. Because that girl was fierce. Even when she was exhausted. Even when no one clapped. She kept showing up. And now? Now she didn't have to. A few weeks later, Olivia sent me a photo. The remodel was done. The house on Meadowgate had been reborn, white trim, fresh windows, a little porch swing like the kind I always wished we had. The inside was modern, clean, full of light. She included a caption. New tenant moves in Friday. Single mom. Works full-time. Has a daughter who loves books. I thought you'd like that. I stared at the image for a long time. Then, with a soft smile, I replied. I love it. Thank you. That house was never mine. But now, in some small way, it finally held the kind of love it was always meant for. Not entitlement. Not manipulation. Just quiet strength. The kind that builds. The kind that doesn't need to ask for recognition. The kind I carried all along. There's a strange moment that comes after you reclaim your life, where you start to realize just how much of it wasn't yours before. I was walking through a bookstore one afternoon, fingers grazing over hard covers I could now afford without hesitation. A young girl sat cross-legged near the children's section, reading aloud to a stuffed bear while her mother browsed. I caught myself smiling. Not because I knew them. But because I remembered myself. A kid who stayed quiet in corners, reading to escape the noise of a house that always made room for Marcus's failures, but never my dreams. I used to think choosing myself would feel selfish. Harsh. Like giving up on people who just needed a little more time. But it didn't. It felt like breathing. Like finally stepping into a space that belonged to me, and no one else. And still, sometimes the echoes returned. Like the time I opened a box of old notebooks from college and found a list titled Ways to Make Mom Smile. Things like buy her coffee, send photos of my apartment, don't complain when she brings up Marcus. I couldn't even remember writing it. But I remembered how it felt, bending myself into smaller and smaller shapes, hoping to be enough for people who were never going to stretch for me. So I burned the list. Not in anger. But in ceremony. One Thursday morning, my coworker, Janine, asked me if I was free to join her for a women's networking event downtown. I hesitated, then nodded. I was trying to say yes more. To things that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with growth. At the event, someone introduced me to a panelist, a woman named Celia Durham. Sharp, magnetic, wealthy. The kind of person who speaks and people lean in. She ran a mentorship initiative for underrepresented women in finance and invited me to speak at their next retreat. I was floored. I've read some of your market analyses, she said. You don't just run numbers, you see patterns others miss. I blinked. You read my work? I do my research, she said with a grin. And I can always tell when someone's had to carry more than their share. You've got that look. What look? The look of someone who got strong because no one else showed up. Something tightened in my chest. She saw it. Not the numbers. Not the polished reports. Me. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't being asked to fix anything. I was being offered a platform. Not as a last resort, but as a leader. A week later, I stood in front of 40 young women at a cabin in the hill country, telling my story, not about the house, not with names, but about burnout, boundaries, and why choosing peace sometimes means walking away from people you once swore you'd protect. One woman, maybe 22, raised her hand. How do you know when it's time to stop saving everyone? I paused. The room was so still I could hear the breeze brushing the windows. You'll know, I said. Because one day, your silence will feel more like safety than absence. And your absence will be the only thing that finally forces others to hear the echo of their own choices. She nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. I used to think my voice was only useful when it was fixing someone else's mess. Now I knew better. My voice was a lifeline. Just not for them anymore. For me. And for every woman still trying to figure out who she's allowed to be when she's not being drained. That night, I received another email. It was short. From my mother. Betty. I heard you're speaking at some event. We saw a photo online. You look happy. I hope you are. I won't ask for anything. Just wanted you to know. Mom. I stared at it for a while. There was no bitterness in me anymore. No urge to reply with a lecture, or a list, or a final jab. She was right. I did look happy. Because I was. Because happiness finally stopped being something I handed out like oxygen and started being something I inhaled for myself. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her. But because she had the photo. She could see the truth now. That was enough. Sometimes, the biggest act of revenge is not fire and fury. It's silence. It's peace. It's a life lived fully, with no apologies, especially to those who only ever knew you as a tool for their survival. I never went back to 242 Meadowgate. I didn't drive by. I didn't look at listing photos. The day Olivia finished the renovation and the new tenant moved in, I lit a candle in my apartment, poured a glass of wine, and wrote a letter to no one. It said, *I am no longer your rescue plan. I am no longer your insurance policy. I am no longer your emotional landfill. I am no longer the duct tape for a family that refused to hold itself together. I am Betty Lark. And for the first time in my life, I am mine. I folded the letter, slipped it into a box of old journals, and taped the lid shut. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about not letting the past speak louder than the future. The day I got promoted to senior portfolio manager, my office desk was showered in congratulatory cards from coworkers. There were emails from my former professors, LinkedIn comments from old colleagues, even flowers from Janine. But none from my family. And that was okay. Because I finally knew the difference between missing someone and needing them. What I had needed all along was myself. Intact. Unexploited. Free. After the promotion, I started mentoring a few young women through Celia Durham's program. One of them, Alicia, reminded me a lot of who I used to be: quiet, overly polite, overworking to prove she belonged. One day, after a particularly tough client pitch, she came to my office looking defeated. "They didn't even listen," she said. "It's like I don't exist unless I'm fixing something." I smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time to stop fixing and start building." She looked at me like I had just said something radical. But I meant it. Because that's what I did. I stopped fixing my family. And I started building a life. One where I mattered even when no one needed anything. Months passed. Then, one sunny afternoon in spring, while I was walking through a neighborhood garden market, I heard someone say my name. I turned. It was Marcus. He looked different. Not just older, but weathered, like someone who had, at last, felt the weight of a roof not held up by his sister's invisible hands. "Hey," he said, shoving his hands in his hoodie pocket. "I didn't know you came here." "I do now and then," I replied. "You?" "Just browsing. I'm renting a place nearby." I nodded. "That's good." There was a long pause. Then he said it. "You really cut us off." I raised an eyebrow. "You really left me no choice." He scratched his neck. "Yeah. I know. We stood there like that for a while. In public, but not pretending. Strangers with the same last name." "I heard about the house," he said. "I heard you didn't pack." He gave a small, bitter laugh. "It was weird. Watching strangers throw your life into a donation box. Must have been." He looked up at me again. "You were right. I know." And then he surprised me. He reached into his back pocket and handed me a folded envelope. I saved up. Not much. But maybe a start. I opened it. A check. $500. Written in his shaky handwriting. The name read, Betty Lark. "It's not about the money, Marcus. I know. But I owed you more than an apology." I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't fixed. But maybe he was finally broken in a way that let the light in. I folded the check and slipped it into my purse. "Thank you." He nodded. We didn't hug. We didn't say let's catch up. Some families don't get back together. They just acknowledge the wreckage and walk away from it separately. And that's what we did. That night, I used his check to book a weekend trip. Nothing extravagant, just a cozy Airbnb in Sedona. I hiked, wrote in a journal, watched the stars without interruption. I bought a potted plant from a roadside stand and named it Clarity. It still sits on my windowsill. My name is Betty Lark. And I learned the hard way that sometimes, family isn't blood. It's boundaries. They screamed, "Get out." And I did. They let the house fall apart. And I let it. Because real love doesn't demand your ruin. Real love sees your value, even when you stop bleeding to prove it. So if you're listening to this, and you're still trying to hold up a home that's built on your exhaustion, just know. You don't have to stay. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to stop saving people who never once saved you. And when you do, it won't feel like loss. It'll feel like sunlight. Like the first deep breath after years of drowning. Like freedom. What do you think about Betty's choice? Was she too harsh, or was this the only way to reclaim her life in peace? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever had to walk away from a toxic family dynamic, you're not alone. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more stories where silence becomes strength, and justice is personal.